Hey students of Kinesiology 323 Sport and Media and Dr. H, this is Joshua Haupt-Jimenez, and for my presentation I'm going to be looking at a few websites within SportsCenter, ESPN. So the first article or website that I decided to analyze was about baseball and the Major League Baseball organization. The title was Needy Cubs to cast a wide net as trade deadline looms. So basically what the website entailed about this piece was that the Chicago Cubs, in order for them to make playoffs within the National League, they need to do a lot of things. Basically, trade a lot of players, have a stronger bullpen, get some better offensive bats in the lineup, and do just a lot of rearranging in order to make it to the playoffs in October. This article was written the 24th of July in 2019 by a man named Jesse Rogers, and I analyzed this on the 24th as well. A lot of this article, the thing that really stood out to me was the idea of sportainment. So, according to Coakley, sportainment is the equivalent of a TV movie that purports to be based on a true story but actually provides fictionalized history. In other words, television constructs sports and viewer experiences. But this process occurs so swiftly that most television viewers believe this experience in sports as a more true and natural form, which obviously is the goal of the editors and the media and on-camera announcers who select these particular images and narratives. This particular image in general doesn't necessarily show much to do with sportainment. More or less, it kind of shows the togetherness within the team. That's Anthony Rizzo to the left, and I am not sure exactly who is on the right, but it shows that they're, to me, it depicts more, it can depict excitement in the fact that they're ready to go to work and they're ready to hopefully make it to the playoffs. This is nothing more really than just to, like I said before, build excitement, and in the fact that it also kind of has a correlation with the production-reception relationship. The production-reception relationship is basically that the media and the production, in this case baseball, kind of correlate together. And the media has definitely correlated with baseball in the fact that they have made noise that the Chicago Cubs are definitely going to be doing some trading here very shortly before the trade deadline hits. And that's definitely going to build, excitement within the Chicago Cubs fans. It's going to sell more tickets. It's going to sell more hot dogs. And that's also good for the program, the club organization. So it kind of just overlaps all together, and it really just builds hype and media attention towards baseball and the Cubs in general. Okay, so for my next example, I looked at a few articles from two different websites on ESPN. The first one was how Djokovic held off Federer to win Wimbledon's men's title. If you guys did not see the match, it was an epic match. I think it was the longest one ever in tennis history, I believe about 5 hours, and Djokovic did end up beating him. And the next one I looked at was Serena Williams hasn't lost focus, she's gained perspective. And if you guys didn't know, Serena lost Wimbledon to, I believe, Sarah Halep, and she lost 6-2, 6-2, which if you don't know it's a pretty bad loss. But I was rooting for her because it's the first time she's been in the finals at Wimbledon ever since she's had her baby. So, pretty much, her article pretty much describes how being a mother is tough with also being a professional athlete, and that it was a lot harder for her to compete, whereas Djokovic's article is basically how he won, how he held off Federer, how he stayed composed, and it depicts the sport in general. So, looking at both of these articles, I noticed a few things. I noticed that Djokovic's article was definitely about the Wimbledon men's title itself. It was the event, whereas Serena's title was, she hasn't lost focus, she's gained perspective, and it seemed like it was more, Serena's article was more of a women's event. And looking at the material from this class, I definitely thought of that as gender marking, which Coakley describes as to referring men's events as the main events, and to women's events as, well, women's events, just a secondary event. Another thing that I looked at was, if you look at the pictures of both of them, you notice that Djokovic has a very powerful, strong, masculine kind of persona in his picture, whereas Serena, she has a more vulnerable and more emotional, looks kind of like she's concerned about her career, like her dog died, you know. So this definitely has some appropriate femininity within it, and Coakley describes this as highlighting the personal characteristics that women distinguish from men. For example, you can see that Djokovic looks more strong, powerful. Speed, you can't really tell because it's just a photo, Serena's looks more emotional and more vulnerable, and a more vulnerable stature. However, the last issue that I really found interesting in this piece that stresses it between the two is definitely the ambivalence within Serena's article. And Coakley describes ambivalence as using narratives that recognize and praise sporting skills, but also include comments that trivialize or undermine a woman's identity and prowess as a serious athlete. And in this article for Serena, it definitely does that. I mean, the title alone says Serena Williams hasn't lost focus, she's gained perspective. That alone has nothing to do with the sport of tennis whatsoever, whereas how Djokovic held off Federer to win Wimbledon men's title, that has only to do with the sport of tennis. And Serena's article definitely, it described her as a great tennis player, but it also described her as a struggling mother. And that definitely undermines her identity as what I would consider the best female tennis player to play the game of tennis. And it undermines that in the fact that, well, she's a woman, she's a mom now. She may not, she hasn't lost focus, but she's gained a different perspective on what it's like to be a mother, and that itself kind of undermines her as an athlete. It doesn't, like I said before, necessarily describe how her match went with Halep. It didn't describe, her tactics or anything like that. It just kind of described, well, her emotional and vulnerable side after the match. So the final website that I looked at within Sports Center was about a NBA basketball player named Kyrie Irving, and the article title was Inside Kyrie's Bag of Tricks. So basically the article discussed how Kyrie Irving is notoriously known for breaking other basketball players' ankles. Basically that just means that he's really good at handling the basketball and really good at dribbling to the point where the players think he's going a certain way, but he actually goes the other way. The player ends up falling down, and that is the definition of breaking your ankles. So the article basically just describes basically how he does it, what he thinks in terms of where he's going to go. Very strategic, very witty, etc. And the thing that really kind of made me think was the idea of race theory. So, according to Coakley, race refers to a population of people who are believed to be naturally or biologically distinct from other populations. So, if Kyrie Irving is very strategic and very witty and very knowledgeable of basketball, he is never actually... There's not one single photo in the entire article that just shows him as a person. Like how they portray Tom Brady sometimes in the front of a magazine, and he's just looking at the magazine. He's not doing any action sport type deal. For Kyrie Irving, on the other hand, every picture or every video is just him in action. It's just him as an example of what I described, breaking other players' ankles, which kind of demoralizes his way of thinking about basketball, because he's very smart, he's very knowledgeable about basketball, but the fact that the media only shows him doing the actions and not necessarily discussing the actions via interview or just photos of himself kind of diminishes that, and it could definitely bring about to an analyst's mind, well, maybe the coach is the one that introduces all of these ways and methods on how to beat out defenders. So I definitely thought about race theory in this piece, and I thought it was a good example. So lastly, I want to close with a few open-ended questions, 3 specifically. And so for the first article, I discussed about sportainment and the Chicago Cubs having to trade players to make it to the playoffs. So a question that I have for you, the viewer, is, do you think sports will always continue to bring about sportainment and show men's sports as the event, the main priority, and not give women's sports as much time? Or do you think that Sports Center and sportscasts are going to devote more time and more money into women's sport and hopefully make them just as good as men's sports are in terms of building excitement? My second question is, in terms of the tennis articles, will women's sport be seen just as equal as the event as men's sport? Do you think that'll ever happen? And also, will ambivalence either lessen or diminish throughout the years? In other words, will women be seen as athletes and not looked at from other perspectives or other emotions? And lastly, this question has to do with Kyrie Irving's article. When will race theory pretty much come to a close? When can we realize that when we describe, for example, Kyrie Irving as very good offensively and very technical and very good with handling the basketball, when will we see him more as a more strategic in photos and not so athletic and action-based? Long story short, do you think that people of different races and ethnicities like Kyrie Irving will ever be showed as Tom Brady? Will he have the same status? Will he be considered knowledgeable, witty, strategic, and shown as a more powerful individual, not doing athletic things or taking action, but just as a figure? Will they become interviewed and ask questions on how they are strategic? So basically, will they be looked at as the white man? Will they ever be looked at like that, or will they not? Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed my presentation, and have a great summer.